In this video, I'm going to show you how to set up a tractor from start to finish. We're going to go ahead and create an implement, set triggers for that implement. We're going to create a field, including a boundary and an angle weigh line. Then we're going to set up a teach-in sequence and teach-in headland. So we're going to do this from start to finish. We have a bunch of additional videos out there where it shows you how to do all this stuff individually, but I thought it would be a good idea to show it all to you all at once. So we're in a brand new tractor. This is a 930 Gen 6, and we're going to set up everything up. So your tractor might have these options installed, your tractor might not have these options installed. If you have one of the older tractors that was built from 2012 to 2015 and it has a TopCon receiver installed, some of the fancier options here at the end you're not going to be able to do. Again, if you have one of those tractors with a TopCon receiver and you'd like to upgrade it to one of the new style receivers, which is either a Trimble or a Novotel, that is possible to do, and then some of these options can be added to your tractor. If you're someone that has a tractor that has a Trimble or a Novotel receiver and you don't have these options, it is possible to add them. You just need to talk to your dealer and they can add them in for you. So to find out what receiver that you have, we're going to go to our VarioGuide menu, VarioGuide main menu. We're going to go down here, System. Then at the top we're going to pick Correction Signal. And you can see right up at the top it tells us what receiver we have. So this one has a Trimble AG482 receiver in it. We're currently set to the free subscription, which is WAS. I don't recommend WAS for anybody. You should at least use RangePoint, RTX, or TerraStar L, or better options at a minimum. The reason for that is for your repeatability of your weigh lines, prevents drifting, prevents having to nudge, that sort of stuff. Okay, so first step here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create an implement. So we'll go back to our main menu, and how I'm going to navigate there quickly is I'm going to hit the home button on the external keys. So when I say hit the home button, now you know what I mean. So hit that. So to create an implement, we'll have to go to our VarioGuide main menu, down here to implement selection. Here, because this is a new tractor, we don't have any implements, so we have to create one. So we'll go ahead up in the top right corner, hit add implement. We'll create a rear implement. Hit our check mark. This one will be a drawbar style implement. Here we have a typewriter comes up. So we're gonna pretend this is a disc. Okay. First thing that we need to do is we need to look over here at our details for that implement. So it is a disc. It's a drawbar type hitch, and right here we have this option here for what type of axle it has. The default for a drawbar implement is steered axle, which in our area anyways, most of our implements are not steered axles. It's important that we change that to a rigid axle. That will adjust or affect how the guidance system operates, because of course the tractor, when you use it, it tries to steer the implement online, not the tractor. So if we left it as a steered implement, it changes how the tractor responds. Okay, so first of all, we'll go way down here to the bottom. We're going to adjust our working width. So our particular disc, we're going to put it in that it is 33 feet. So I'm going to clear my inches. I'm going to navigate over here to my feet. I'm going to insert 33 feet. Now I'll hit my check mark. Working width is 33 feet. You'll notice here our center distance is half of our working width. That is what we want, because we want this implement to trail square behind the tractor. If it was offset one way or the other, we could adjust that with our center distance, but in this case we're not going to do that. This value right here, this is our navigation point. So as I told you before, how that our steering axle or our rigid axle affects how this tractor operates, this value here does as well. This value is extremely important. And probably 95% of the tractors that come through our shop, I look at some people's settings, and this is always set to 0. That is not right. You need to get your tape measure out and look at just to the left of this red box. There's an arrow telling you what to measure. You need to measure from the hitch pin back to the navigation point of the implement. So in our case, since we're using a disc, we're going to measure from our hitch pin to the center of the disc between the first row of discs and the rear row of discs, and we're going to input that value. In my case, I'm going to use 25 feet and 10 inches. Now this box over on this side, on the right hand side, this here is also an important value, and what this is doing is it's telling the tractor when the coverage map should turn on and shut off. If we left this value at 0, your coverage map that applies behind the tractor is going to happen at the hitch pin. We all know that that's not where the ground engaging point is. It's further back at the back side of the disc. Again, just to the right of this red box, you can see that arrow that's telling you to measure from the hitch pin to the back of the implement. So my disc, I'm going to say that it is 30 feet 10 inches. Now my implement has been set up correctly. The next thing that we need to do is set up our triggers. And what our triggers is, what is it on the implement that we want to turn the coverage map on and off. So in this case with a disc, you can imagine it's probably a hydraulic valve, because we're going to use a hydraulic valve to set the disc down to engage the dirt. That's when we want the coverage map to turn on, and then we'll use that same hydraulic valve to lift the disc out of the ground, and that's when we want that map to shut off. Let's say you had something complicated, that you had multiple things that you wanted. So for example, you wanted on, say, like a pull-type manure spreader, you have a set of floor chains that are hydraulically driven, and you have a PTO that runs the beaters. So in that case, you could pick both PTO and hydraulic valves, and then both of those things have to be satisfied before your coverage map turns on. In this case, back to our disc, what we're going to do here is we go up to the very top, to the right here, and we're going to switch this auto button over to automatic. Now you'll see all these icons down this right hand side are able for us to pick them. If we leave this off, we can't pick them, they're grayed out. So we need to enable it. We're going to go down, and we know that our disc, we're going to run it with a hydraulic valve, so I'm going to pick hydraulic valve. And that's the only one that I'm going to turn on. If I turn on some of these other ones like this, that means all of those things have to be actuated before that coverage map is going to enable. So now over here to the left, we have the ability to define what valve that we're physically using. In my case, I'm going to use the yellow valve. The plus position is going to be lifting the valve, so that's not what I want to use here. I want to start counting in the negative position. So when I actuate my yellow valve into the negative position, my disc drops into the ground, and that's when my coverage map starts counting. My stop position is positive, so we'll leave that as is. Okay, our implement is now completely set up. I'm going to go one step further, because at the end of this we're going to get into Teach in Headland, and Teach in Headland is where the tractor has the ability to do automatic U-turns. So there's some information that the tractor needs in order for that to be accomplished. So down here on the bottom we have this button right here. If your tractor doesn't have this button, then it doesn't have that option. But again, if you have a Trimble receiver or a Novatel receiver, you have the ability to have this added to your tractor. So in here, what we're going to do first of all is we're going to define our implement width, which was 33 feet. We're going to define our hitch length, which was 30 feet 10 inches. I wish that that would self-populate in there from the implement selection, but it doesn't. We have to set that. Okay. Now the next thing here is we have to set our minimum turn radius. So we have the opportunity here to define this manually. I could go in this and I could say that this tractor has a minimum turn radius of 25 feet. But we don't really know that. So the best way to actually determine this is use these automatic buttons up here at the top. So you should have at this time the implement hooked onto the tractor, go out into an open field, and what we'll do is we'll actually steer the tractor as sharp as we can and as smoothly as you can without driving or hitting the hitch of the implement. So I'm currently driving right now, I'm turning to the right, I'm keeping a constant arc in my turn. If you're erratic with your turns, turning the steering wheel back and forth, it'll mess up this measurement. So you want to be consistent. If you have to drive 3 circles for it to achieve this, then go ahead and do that. Once you have a smooth arc, you go ahead and you hit that auto button, and you'll see there our value changed to 21 foot 1 inch. Now I turn to the left. Same thing. I get a nice, smooth, consistent turn where I'm not hitting my implement's hitch with my back tire, and then I go ahead and I hit my left button. Now you can tell I obviously was steering way too sharp to the left because I actually don't have an implement behind my tractor. So I'm going to manually turn and change those values to 40 feet. "40 feet in one of my other tests with an implement seemed satisfactory. I had it set at 32 initially, which is what the auto detection determined for that particular implement, and I was afraid I was going to hit the hitch during my turns, so I bumped it up a couple of feet just to be safe. You can play with this, you can customize this. It does take a little bit of time and effort to figure it out, but once you have it figured out, you don't have to do it anymore. You set it in here and it's saved. Okay, so after we have that set up, now what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to set up our teach-in settings. So teach-in is where we can have 27 different functions saved and stored and automatically operated with our go and end buttons on the joystick. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit my home key. Now I'm going to go to my tractor main menu. I'm going to go down to teach-in, and right here is where I can set up a teach-in. Right now my teach-in is locked. So there's 2 ways that you can unlock teach-in. One of them is you can push the white button with the go and end symbols on the armrest, or you can touch the top right corner of the screen and I can unlock it that way. The first one that I want to change is I want to adjust my go 1 button. So currently right now you can see it's set to end 1. So I can change that one of 2 ways. Either I can tap the button on the joystick and it changes it automatically in the screen, or I can tap on this line here, and now whichever button is brown, that's the button that you've selected. So I'm going to go ahead and change my go 1. Now I'm going to go over here on the right hand side. I'm going to go to edit offline. My current function is my reversible fan, so I'm going to go ahead and change that. So I select my reversible fan. Now what I'm going to do is, my first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to enable a cruise control. So I'm going to go into my tractor group. I'm going to select cruise number 1 and hit my check mark. Now I'm going to add in another function. This icon right here, the 3rd one down, that adds in another function. We'll go ahead and add one. It added in the copy of the above. So we'll go ahead and click on box number 2, cruise number 1, which enables it. Now we're going to change this to our yellow hydraulic valve, because our yellow valve in the minus position sets our disc in the ground. So we'll select yellow valve, we'll pick the minus direction, and we'll hit our check mark. Now next here we have our trigger. Triggers are important. There are a couple of different triggers. They can be set by 3-point hitch settings, manually, which means that you have to tap the go 1 button a second time in order for it to activate. We can set it by a distance, that's what this here means, or we can set it by a time. In my situation, I want my cruise control to enable and I want my disc to drop at the exact same time. So I'll go ahead and I'll just pick the clock for time. I'll navigate over here to my value, and I'll use my scroll dial on the side of the terminal, and I'll set that to 0. If we had an additional function in here that we did not want, let's say I added in a 3rd line here, let's say we didn't want that one, what we could do is we could select it. So we click on the box beside number 3, it brings up our functional group, what we do here is we hit the red X, the functional group will go away. Now over here on the right hand side, we can select the trash can and it'll delete it. You'll note that that line number 3 is kind of a teal color, a blue color. That means that's the one that's selected and that's the one that's going to get deleted. So now if I hit this trash can, that line will disappear. Or the other thing that you can do here is if we add in function, and we'll just change that function to something, let's talk about this. So let's add auto steer into this function. So we want auto steer engaged. Now, keep in mind that again, down and throughout this video, we're going to talk about teaching Headland, where the tractor is going to do automatic U-turns at the headlands. If you're going to use that option, you cannot have auto steer set as one of your teach-ins. It'll actually screw up the sequence and it will make it so that your teach-in automatic will not function. So that's important to note. But what I was going to say is, let's say we wanted to shuffle this around in the list. Let's say that we wanted this line number 3 actually before our hydraulic valve. So what we do is we highlight line number 3, then we come over here to this icon, and that will shuffle it up in the list. It'll move it to spot 2. But like I said, I don't want that one. So I'm just showing you how to do that. I'm going to delete it. Okay, so this is my teaching sequence that I'm going to use. It's pretty basic. It's one cruise control and it's a hydraulic valve. So we will hit our return button in the bottom here. It's going to ask us if we want to apply those changes. We'll say yes. Now they're set. So now I want to adjust my end one, so that at the headland, now what will happen is we'll actually switch it over to cruise number 2, which will be a slower speed, and we'll have our yellow valve go to the positive position, which will lift our disc out of the ground. So I'll click on the end 1 button on the joystick, or I can pick it in the list here. Now we go to that one. So again, this one's currently set for reversible fan, but I will change that, so I'll edit it offline. I'll click on function number 1. I'm going to change that to a cruise control, so I'm going to select the tractor group. I'll select cruise number 2, enable it. Now I'm going to add in another function, so the 3rd button down on the right hand side here, that adds in another one. We'll go over and we'll select the 2nd line, and we're going to select our yellow valve in the positive position to lift that disc out of the ground. Again, I want that to happen right away. So in this time, it's already set to distance of 0 feet. So we'll go ahead and use that. It's the same thing as a clock set to 0. Again, we'll hit the check mark. We'll apply those changes. Okay, now we have a basic teach-in set. Now the next thing to note here though is that we told it to use that yellow valve. So now we have to define what that yellow valve is going to do. So we'll go and we'll hit our home key. Go up here to the tractor main menu. We'll go down to our hydraulic valves. So now we're going to have to define that yellow valve on what we want it to do. You'll see here that that yellow valve is currently locked. We're going to go ahead and push the blue hydraulic lock icon in the armrest to unlock it. We can change our flow rates on the valve by tapping on whichever direction that we want to adjust. We're going to adjust ours to 26.5 gallons per minute on both positive and negative. If you prefer it to be in liters per minute, you can go into your administration menu and you can change the language. You can change it from English US to English GB, and it will change it to liters, as well as kilometers per hour. So we've adjusted our flow rate. Now over here we want to set our timer. So right now the timer is set to infinity, which we don't want that. So my disc, I know that it takes it 4 seconds to lower and it takes it 4 seconds to lift. It's actually a little less than that. I think it's 3 seconds, but I'm going to put in 4 seconds. Okay, so we've defined a time. Now over here on the right hand side, we have to enable this clock for that to actually operate. So what that means is when that clock is turned on, and you can see that in that black box on those hydraulic valves, as soon as you activate the valve in either position, minus or plus, the valve will run at 26.5 gallons per minute for 4 seconds, and it will shut off. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go and create a field. So we'll hit our home key, go to VarioGuide, VarioGuide main menu. We're going to go to field settings. Again, this is a new tractor. It does not have any field stored. You can click this, the box is empty. So we'll exit here. We'll go ahead and we'll hit the plus field. We're going to name this field to PFC test. PFC is for Pentagon Farm Center. So now we have a field created. Now the next thing we need is a boundary. In order for teach-in Headland and for teach-in automatic to operate, you have to have a boundary. So now we're going to create a boundary. Go down to our boundary plus. We're going to keep this simple. There's multiple ways to create a boundary, but we'll keep it simple and we'll use just a simple recording. You can record from the left side of the implement, the right side of the implement, or the center of the tractor. In my case, the way that I'm going to do this visualization for you, I'm going to use the center of the tractor. Now you'll notice over here on the right hand side we have this record button that has appeared. I'm going to go ahead and click record, and I'm going to start recording my boundary. You'll see the red tracer behind the tractor that shows where the boundary is going to be. This is a 15-acre field that we have next door to our location here. So I'm just going to do some random driving and create us a quick boundary. Okay, we're almost completed our boundary. You can see our start point, so we'll just drive up to that. Okay. Now I'm going to stop the tractor. Now when I went to the full screen mode, you can see here we're in conventional mode because we have all the wrenches and whatnot on the right hand side of the screen. So we actually have to tap this second icon from the bottom, and we have to change this to add mode. And now you can see our headland actions that are happening here. So we've completed our headland. Now we'll go ahead and we'll hit this stop icon. It asks us if we want to save the boundary, which of course we do. Now what we can do after we have a boundary is if we go back into our field settings, we can actually see how big that field is. So I'll go ahead and I'll hit the home button. I'll go to VarioGuide, VarioGuide main menu, field settings. And now down here underneath the boundary in the middle of the screen, you can see that this field is 13.5 acres. Okay, now that our boundary is complete, next step we're going to drive to the part in the field where we want to start our job, and we're going to set a AV line. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a 90-degree angle. So we'll go up here to add a wayline. We'll go down to A plus angle. Here right now the tractor's pointing 90.6075 degrees. As I drive the tractor, you'll see that that value will change. So you can use the direction it's currently pointed, or you can just change it manually. So we'll use 90 degrees. Now we have this A button that has popped out over here. We'll go ahead and select that. Now here we have a couple of options when that line pops up. So what you have here is the current one that's selected is the X. That'll cancel what we just did. This next one here with the floppy disk with the X through the steering wheel, that will save the wayline to the field, but it will not load it. It saves it for later, if that makes sense. Then this one here on the left, it saves it and it will load it. So we'll go ahead and select that. Now we don't have any waylines that popped up, and the reason being is because my steering subsystem is not turned on. So on my white buttons on my armrest, I have to select the rear steering wheel one, the steering wheel with the hash lines through it. We'll hit that. Now our angle line appears. So now let's set up our teach-in automatic. So we'll go to VarioGuide, VarioGuide main menu. We'll go down here to Auto Teach-in, our Headland settings. Now up here, every implement is different, so you're going to have to figure out what works for you. In our case, I'm going to say that I'm going to make 4 headland passes around this field. So my implement is 33 feet wide. I have a 6-inch overlap. So I'm going to go ahead and tell it that my headland width right here is 130 feet. So that's 33 feet wide times 4 minus 6 inches of overlap for each pass. So that's minus 2 feet. So we'll end up with 130 feet. That gives us exactly 4 way lines. Down here at the very bottom is where we can define what sequence or what teach-in sequence we want to have happen when we enter our headland. So as you can remember, we set up our end 1 to change our cruise control to cruise number 2 and to also actuate our yellow valve. This icon above it here is where we can adjust at what point in time does that happen. Again, every implement's different, depends a little bit on your ground speed, how fast you're traveling, things like that, how fast does that implement lift out of the ground as to when you want this to happen. In this case, I'm just going to leave it at 0 to keep it simple, but what happens is if we adjust that value, it'll change when that occurs compared to that line. We have another one over here that we can adjust for when we enter back into the field off of the headland. At what distance from that interior boundary do we want that to occur? And then lastly, down here at the very bottom, we have the ability again to change which teach-in sequence that we want to have happen. We used Go 1 button. What that's going to do is it's going to adjust our cruise control, it's going to speed us up, and it's going to activate our yellow valve and drop our implement into the ground. Lastly, we want to enable our teach-in automatic. So over here on the right hand side, we have to click on this button here and we turn it on. So it's giving us a warning message that we've enabled it. You can see here over on the left hand side on the guidance screen in the bottom left corner, we now have a new blue box that's appeared with telling us that in 573 feet our teach-in sequence will occur. One thing I just want to note while you're in this screen is when we'll just shut this sequence off. If you make a change to our distance from our headland here, so let me quickly make a change here, so I'll change this to 125 feet. You'll notice now my auto teach-in button is grayed out over here. I can't select it. It takes it a second to calculate, and then you'll see that interior line pop in my guidance screen here in the bottom left corner, that teal line. After that's popped in there, now we can go ahead and select that auto teach-in. I'm going to change it back to 130 because that's what I want it to be. I'm going to wait for a second. Now it's populated. It's ready to go. We've activated it. Okay. Now our next step here is we're going to enable our turn assistant, our teach-in headland. So we're going to go ahead and go back one screen. Now we'll go down here to our auto U-turns. Again, this is an option. Your tractor might not have this. If you have a Trimble or a Novatel receiver, you could have this. You just got to talk to your dealer and they can add it for you. There's 2 types of turns available. Up here in the top we have our pass type. It's currently set to U-turn. I can click on that. We can change it from U-turn to part field mode. So I'm not going to explain part field mode right now because we're actually going to do that one, but I'll explain U-turn. So we'll go ahead and select U-turn. Now we have over here our starting pass. Our starting pass is important. So what we need to do is we need to tell the tractor what way line in the field do we want this to start on. So I'm currently sitting on line number 3. As you can see that down in the bottom corner of my guidance screen, I'm on line number 3. So I'm going to make sure that that's set to 3. If it was something different, if for example it said number 4 up here in my starting pass, all I have to do is click on that box. It'll automatically put in the value of the line that we're currently on, so it defaults to 3. If we wanted to change it to something different here, we sure could, but we'll leave it at 3. Next over here is our pass width. So this here is where we can tell the system to skip rows or not. So if we go in here, we can tell it, set values in here between 1 and 30. So if you wanted to start in the field and work from one side all the way clear across to the other side without skipping, you'd enter a 1 in here. If we wanted to skip a row, so if you wanted to go from row number 1 to 3 to 5, etc., we would change this to a number 2. And you can see here underneath our wayline pattern adjusted. It's going to take us from 3 to 5 to 7 and so on. If we didn't want that, if we wanted to work from one side to the other, we change that to number 1, and now you'll see that it's going to take us from each row, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. Okay, now down here into the measurements. So to the left of the red box, you see a value of 130 feet. That value is predetermined by our teach-in automatic. We entered 130 feet in there. We cannot change that in this particular screen. If we needed to alter that, we have to go into our teach-in automatic screen to make that change. The value that's currently highlighted is how far away from that headland do we want the tractor in our turn. So it's currently set to 10 feet. Let's change it to something that probably is unrealistic. Let's change this to 50 feet. So now we're telling the tractor to stay 50 feet away from that outside boundary. The next one down here in the center is our turn radius. Our turn radius was calculated already earlier in this video. If we click on it, you can see that our minimum value up here at the top is 40 and our maximum value is 328. So we cannot go any lower than 40 because when we did our automatic calculation earlier, we told it that our value was 40. So we could always increase it, but we can't decrease it here. Lastly, this one down here. This is how far do we want the tractor to travel past our boundary line before the turn starts, and vice versa. When do we want that tractor to turn to go back into our headland? An example of this would be if you have a drawbar implement with a long drawbar length. You need that implement to pass all the way through the headland before the tractor starts to turn. So in our case, we have a 30-foot long implement here, so we probably should put a value in there. Now that we think that we have it set up, let's see if the system can actually do it. So over here on the right-hand side, we have a calculator with these rotating arrows. If we go ahead and click that, the system will now calculate and determine, can it achieve what we're asking it to do? You see down here at the bottom we have two boxes. The left one is how many turns are possible, and the right one is how many turns are not possible. So you notice that it has told us that it can't make any of the turns. 11 turns have failed and 0 turns have succeeded. Again, that's probably due to my 50 value that I put in here for our distance from our headland. So now let's go ahead and change that to something else. Let's change it to 15 feet. Now we'll try to recalculate it again. It still doesn't like it. You see, it can make 1 turn and it can't make 10. I suspect that's because of my distance right here, that I'm telling the tractor to drive 30 feet past that interior line, plus I expect it to make this big huge corner and turn around. So I'm going to take this 30 feet and I'm actually just going to get rid of it for the time's sake. Now over here on the right hand side, we'll hit recalculate again. Now you'll see that it can achieve 8 and it can't achieve 1. So you see here that every implement is different. You have to go in here and you have to figure this out. So we could do this by maybe adding another headland pass to this field. We currently have it set at 4. The reason that we're having troubles here with this one, I think, is because of our hitch length. We have a 30-foot long hitch on this particular unit, and I don't want to do more than 4 headland passes, so we'll go ahead and we'll just alter this distance here to, say, 10 feet. And we'll retry it again. Recalculate. Now it's good. You can see we can do 9. We can complete 9 turns. So now if we wanted to activate this, what we need to do is we need to go up here to our auto turns. We need to enable that. And now it's ready to go. We go to our full screen, we get some ground speed, we get to the end of the field, and the tractor would automatically turn for us. However, I'm going to show you a different mode. We're going to disable that one. We're going to change from U-turn mode to part field mode. So part field mode is where it will skip a certain amount of passes and it will come back kind of where we started and it'll go back. So it's hard to explain, but what we'll do here is we'll select part field mode. We need to make sure that our starting pass is accurate, which it is. It's number 3. Then over here, our pass width. How many passes do we want to skip? So in this case, I'm going to pick 5. So what will happen is it's going to go from row 3 over to row 6, back to row 4, then to row 7, 5, 8, 11, etc. It'll make more sense when we actually activate it. So now that we've done this, we have to go over here and we have to recalculate again and see if it will actually work. It will. We succeeded. We can do 9 turns, so we're good. Now we can scroll up here to this magnifying glass and we can actually see what the field's going to look like. So you'll notice here, the tractor is currently right there. It's going to drive straight. It's going to skip over here. It's row number 5, I believe it was. And it's going to come back here to number 4, keep going. So let's now, I'll show you what that looks like. So after we've calculated, we're happy with the view of the field, what it's going to do. Now we're going to go down here, we're going to activate Headlands Automatic. Now you can see down here again in the bottom left corner, we have an additional icon. So let's talk about that icon quickly. So we have a tractor, he's currently green. That tractor tells you whether you're driving too fast or not when you get into your turn. So as we start to operate here, that tractor probably will turn red because we're going to go scooting down this line. And once we reach that headland, we have to slow the tractor down. So that's what we're going to do with cruise controls and our teach-in automatic. So 710 feet from now is when that's going to occur. So I want to just double check my cruise controls here quick to make sure they're not too fast. So go to our tractor menu, tractor main menu, go to engine and transmission. We'll go over here to our cruise control number 1. I think that's reasonable for the field that I'm in. And cruise 2, I'm just going to lower that down just a little bit. Okay. I hit the home to get out of there. Now, one more little detail I'm going to show you, one last thing before we do this. I'm going to show you how we can add our coverage mapping in with the calculator. So down here in the bottom left corner, you can see 0 acres per hour. That is currently showing us our area efficiency. It shows us how many acres we're covering per hour. We can change that here to this onboard computer number 1 worked area. So what's going to happen is when the green painting, the map behind the tractor is happening, it will count up our acres. It's a little bit complicated, but I'll show you here how to do that. So we're going to change that to our onboard computer 1 worked area. Now we have to hit our home key, back to our main menu. We're going to navigate down to our VarioDoc main menu. We'll go down here to Tractor and Calculator, which is our onboard computer. Now up at the top here, we have to turn this calculator on. So number 1 is currently switched off. We're going to go ahead and turn it on. If you have a bunch of numbers already populated in here, you can reset them by hitting this 0. It asks us if we want to reset this onboard computer, so we'll go ahead and say yes. Okay. One more step is we have to set our trigger for this onboard computer. So we have to go to our triggers. Typically the tractor is defaulted to tractor in this particular box, but in our case we have an implement set up with triggers already pre-selected. So we don't need to go in here and reselect yellow, reselect minus, etc. We don't need to do that. What we can do here is we click on a tractor, and we're going to change that to implement. Now down here, we're going to go ahead and define what implement it is. It's currently set to none, so we'll go ahead and pick it. We'll change it to our disk. Now our triggers will work because our disk already has a trigger pre-populated for it. So now what will happen, we'll hit the home key. We'll maximize our guidance screen. Now what will happen is in the bottom left hand corner, as our as applied map, coverage map is enabled, it will count up for us. So I think we're ready now. So we'll go ahead, we'll get some ground speed. We're going to enable our guidance, because remember we can't have that in a teaching because it's going to mess up our auto U-turn sequence. So we'll go ahead and we'll enable that. Now I'm going to hit my go 1 button. So now my cruise control is took off, my hydraulic valve is actuated, and my trigger is working properly because we have coverage occurring. So again, as you can see, we're driving too fast. The tractor is red for our turn up ahead. So we need to make sure that we have either our cruise control set properly to drop our speed down low enough so that it can make that turn, because we don't want to make this turn up here at 11 miles per hour. So I'm not touching the steering wheel. This tractor is going to do everything by itself. Tractor slowed down, T-chin activated. You can tell because our trigger stopped working, that means our yellow valve lifted our implement out of the ground. Now it's going to get me lined up with our next row here. As soon as those flags cross that interior blue line, our T-chin kicks in. Tractor's now doing 11 miles per hour. Implement's in the ground. So if you have this set up properly, T-chin automatic, T-chin headland, or you can complete a field without touching anything. At this point, I'm not touching any controls. Our part field mode is going to take us back over here to our second row, which is actually our row number 4. Chin's going to enable, drops our implement down, and away we go. I think adjusting those flag distances on my T-chin in my case here would be smart, because it's pretty aggressive when it takes off to 11 miles per hour when I'm not fully straight in the tractor yet, and also when I come into my headland, I needed to slow down sooner, so I need to adjust those flags a little bit. Or the other way to adjust them too is in our T-chin. We can set our distances and our times for each of our functions within our T-chin. See in the bottom left corner as well, we have our acre counter counting correctly as I'm applying. Go ahead and just adjust my cruise control just a little bit here. Alright, there we go, folks. We just completed our 6.22 acres. So now you just have to go and tidy up your headlands, and this job will be finished. So now there's just one other little detail that I want to show you. So after you have your implements set up correctly, you know, your hydraulic flow rates, your cruise controls, your diff locks, front wheel assists, all that sort of stuff that you adjust, we have the ability to save that in the tractor. So here's how you do that. So we'll go ahead and hit the home key. We'll go down here to our administration menu. We'll go to administration main menu. Now the second icon down here, this is how we save settings into the tractor. The one above it is how we would load them. So we'll go ahead and we're going to save this. Now it tells you here that you can only load and save settings with the engine running, and loading is only possible when the machine is stationary and in neutral, and also our teach-in cannot be active. So tractor has to be in neutral, teach-in can't be active, etc. So what we'll go ahead and we'll just click on that button now. Tractor calculates for a minute. Now here we can go in and we can save this implement. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit the ABC button. Brings us up a typewriter here. We can name this. We're going to call this the disk. That's what we called it this time. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit the check mark. Now that is saved in this tractor forever. So the next time that you come back to this same disk, you don't have to remember all the flow rates you set, all the certain things that you put in there for that implement. You can simply load them out of this menu. So there's two ways to load this. One way is up here at the very top. We can go into our load settings page, and we can load the settings right from here. So you can save a bunch of implements in here, and you can scroll them all, or put all your implements in here, save them, and pick them from the list. The other way to load an implement is when you first start the tractor. So I'll show you here. I'll shut this one off. You have this icon up top with it says load settings on it. If you click on that button, it'll take you straight into your load settings page, so you don't have to navigate into the administration menu. So if we go ahead and we click on that, it brings you up the list of implements that you have saved. So you hook on your disc, you select disc, you hit the check mark. Now automatically all of the settings in the tractor have changed to how we had it last saved. So let's say now we're using our disc and we make a change to it. So let's go ahead and we'll just change a hydraulic flow rate for an example. So we're going to adjust it from 26.5 to 26.75. Okay, now we made a change to our disc. You'll also notice here it says at the top now tractor main menu, and it says disc underneath it. So that's how you know which implement that you have currently set. If that disc is blank and there's nothing in there, then you don't have any loaded implements in. So anyways, now that we made a change to our hydraulic flow rate, now when I switch off the key, you'll notice here on the terminal that it tells us that we made a change to the disc. So we have two options. We can save the changes, or we can save the changes to a new name. We have 30 seconds to do this. So we would go ahead and we'd hit this top key and we would save those particular changes. If you don't want to make any changes, you let the timer run out, then it just won't save it. So we'll go ahead and we'll pick that. Now it goes back to this main screen. Now it's shut off. Okay, so that's a quick overview on how to set up a tractor from start to finish. I hope that helps you guys.